In the past 6 months, having not previously had much food experience, I've simultaneously, via 2 different production companies, landed a bunch of jobs for fast food giants McDonald's. The first with a healthy budget of approximately $80,000, and the second with a slightly more challenging $8,000. In this video, I'm going to share both those with you, and we're going to take a look at the differences. What the 8K might have missed out on, where money was spent, what I would have liked to have done differently if we had more money. Hi internet users, my name's Scott, a director and cinematographer based in London, England. And if you still haven't subscribed to this channel, then make my month and click that big red subscribe button. So first, a couple of caveats. These aren't necessarily like-for-like comparisons. The 80K budget was a 4-minute film about new products and food innovation to be shown primarily at McDonald's annual shareholder summit. The 8K budget was for a 30-second ad to be shown online only. Annoyingly, I can't actually show you most of the innovation film due to a lot of the products not actually being out yet. But let's start by looking at a short extract from it to give you an idea of the finished product.
At last, we're finally live with phase 1 of the rollout. Every element of the McPlan has been meticulously chosen to create the perfect burger build. Whether in the patty, co-developed with Beyond Meat, or in the vegan cheese made with a pea protein that tastes just like the real thing. We checked every ingredient and every part of the supply chain to make sure it was 100% vegan. The McPlan is cooked separately in the Merry Chef and has dedicated utensils. We have the first 100% vegan burger in the IEO market.
But this is not just for vegans. It's 10 layers of deliciousness, created as a burger for all, an accessible new option, allowing us to give the 4 million customers we serve every day the option to try a great tasting, affordable vegan burger.
$80,000 for a food ad, of which, although it was considerably longer than your average food ad, it contains all of the elements. It's surprisingly not a large budget. Although I've not yet had the pleasure, it's not unusual to spend hundreds of thousands and several weeks shooting food ads, especially when it comes to the food porn side of things. We shot this in just 2 days. The agency involved was McDonald's advertising agency of 30 plus years. They wanted it to look as much like an ad as possible in levels of gloss and perfection, but being very aware of the limiting budget. Expectations were high, but not unrealistic. With nothing particularly major on my show reel to prove myself, in the world of food at least, I spent one Wednesday evening using my limited at-home resources to shoot a few shots with plenty of disclaimers, which they were given along with a selection of my higher-end work. Past sending examples of my work, along with the 2 other directing options that were presented to them, there wasn't a lot I had to do to win the job. That's outside of the 3 hours I spent of my Wednesday night creating some basic-looking food shots. After I'd officially won the job, prep involved a weekend turning McDonald's words into a script that worked in 4 minutes or less, as well as putting together a semi-thorough treatment. Again, because of various products not actually being out yet, I've had to redact a few things, but feel free to hit that pause button if you want to read through the sorts of things I said in more detail. I included a bunch of references, some of my favourite ads from the past decade from a style perspective actually happening to have been McDonald's ads themselves. Talked about sound design. I almost always talk about sound design, and I tried to explain what went where alongside the visuals best I could by colour coding the script. I had a ton of meetings for this, 2 in person at McDonald's HQ and somewhere around 12 Zoom meetings leading up to the shoot with the producers, the agency, the DOP, the food economist, the art director, the illustrator, the animator, and the storyboard artist, because this one had storyboards. It was a real pleasure watching him sketch as I described the frames to him from my hotel room the night before an altogether different shoot on a Sunday evening down in Weymouth. He then spent a whole day bringing them to life, and I think he did a stellar job. There was, of course, the always tense PPM, pre-production meeting, remember? Where we shared an updated version of my treatment, the storyboards. We showed this alongside an animatic I put together using the storyboards, some temp music, and my own voice narrating the script. This wasn't something I'd been asked for, or by any means had to do, but based on earlier meetings, I knew it was going to take a while to go through everything and explain frame by frame, and we only had a limited time with the client, so I thought it just best for everyone to show them what was what, as I had the luxury of the boards to work with. We shared previews of the graphics for the animation portion of the video, location details, talent, which were both McDonald's employees, agency employees, and a bunch of extras from a casting call we'd done a week prior. For this, production just sent me a list from the casting agency of people who were available with photos. I just circled my favourites whilst looking for a variety of different looking people. This wasn't going to be anything particularly complicated acting wise, so self-tapes weren't needed. The client and agency got a limited look at wardrobe, something we discussed in detail but not had the budget to stretch to anything more than asking everyone to bring unbranded options from home. They got a slightly less limited peek at props that had been sourced, created and ordered, a shoot schedule and a breakdown of the shots we'd be capturing, as well as a look at the test I'd done during the week, in order to prove to my cinematographer that what I wanted to achieve for one of the shots was in fact possible, even though he'd assured me that it wasn't. for the food porn element, they were insistent on getting a DOP on board who specialises in food cinematography. I was more than happy to oblige, as I'm always keen to work with better cinematographers than myself because it gives me a chance to learn. Out of a slightly limited selection of DOPs that had good food work on their reel, we failed to get first, second, third, or even fourth option that had both the skill set and the availability. We ended up going with an older generation of cinematographer who had a reel comprised solely of food work, lots of sexy looking slow-mo stuff. I think I'm right in saying he came in slightly more expensive than the average APA rate here in the UK, and was already part booked, so we split the days in half. I DP'd alongside my directing duties on the first day, and then he came in to handle all the food porn on the second. The budget allowed for both an Arri Alexa Mini and some beautiful but bulky Hawk anamorphics, as well as a Phantom Flex and a selection of Arri macro lenses for the second day. Getting the Phantom along in budget had been a stretch as it was, but I would have loved to have brought in some motion control to add some real wow to the food porn. One day. The shoot went pretty much as well as could have been expected. The gaffer slept through his alarm on the first day, which wasn't great for stress levels, and the older generations that were brought in on the second day move a little slower than I'm used to, but we just about managed to make it work in the cut. I say we, I was asked to do the cut too, because the in-house editors at the production company were all fully booked, and I've previously edited some projects I've directed for this particular production company before. I was more than happy to do this though, because it not only bumped my pay packet, but cut out the middleman to turn this around as quickly as we needed to. Following various amends, it then went off to my third choice colorist, as production hadn't managed to get the first two to come in on budget. I sat in the colour house for the day working on my laptop and making the odd comment, whilst they did what they do best and made it all look pretty. Before we look at the 8K video, let's put some stats up on the screen and see what it took to make this. A total of 14 people. A producer, a production manager, a director, a cinematographer, 2 different focus pullers. I had my guy, the other DOP Nick had his. A phantom op, a gaffer, 1 spark, sound op, art director, food economist, the food economist assistant, and a runner. Plus extras at some expense and an even larger cast of employees from McDonald's and volunteers from the agency. All of these people were also fed and watered 2 meals of the day from external catering that was brought in. And let me remind you that this is considered a relatively small shoot in the scale of food commercial work. Oh yeah, and the pay. To direct, part DP and edit this piece, I was paid a buyout fee of £8,000 or approximately $10,800. That, at the time, I thought was a really good rate, but now that I'm looking at the amount of work that I put into this whilst making this video for you lot, I don't actually think I did that well out of this, especially considering the budget. And I bought a number of pieces of my own equipment onto the job at no charge because I wanted the money to be put elsewhere to make this the very best it could be. It was my choice to do this, no one was holding a gun against my head, but just saying. Both of the films had very different standard expectations. Where the first had been for the agency who handled all of McDonald's glossier, larger-than-life advertising, this second was for the PR agency that handled all of their press here in the UK. They didn't want it to look glossy. They wanted it to look real. They didn't want a food stylist or food economist. They wanted the product to look just like it would if you bought it in store. My heart shattered as my creative dreams were shot down. Maybe you might be able to mend those broken pieces by hitting the like button below. Let's take a look at the ad. I was initially asked about the job in early January, but only got a full brief at 5 PM on the Monday, just 36 hours before we were due to be shooting. I put together a very basic treatment, trying to add a little social fun to an otherwise very basic video and set about crewing up with the production company. Again, if you want to read in more detail the actual words that I wrote, then get ready on that pause button. I won the job simply because the production company wanted me to do it, and I'd done a bunch of bits with them for McDonald's before, so there wasn't really much winning to be done. Aside from the initial briefing, I didn't have to attend any meetings with agency, client, or production, just a little bit of back and forth over WhatsApp. I did, however, spend somewhere between 4 and 6 hours of my time researching and inquiring over internet and phone, trying to work out how feasible it was to pull off a particular shot from the original verbal briefing. This was before we got the final brief. This was canned though, and the budget was slashed, so that time was primarily spent for nothing. However, I did learn a few things now locked in the old think tank should I require them on a future shoot. The crew consisted of me, directing and DPing, a camera assistant, gaffer, 1 spark, and 1 producer on set. Initially, production didn't even want to stretch for the spa, so until the morning of the shoot, it was looking like just 4 of us to pull this off and wrap within a staggering 4.5-hour window we'd been granted at the location. With the exception of the gaffer's rates, who comes with a bunch of his own lighting and grip equipment, any kit allowance went to the production company because they were trying to make as much buck as they could out of this tiny budget. So we shot on their red Komodo with their Zeiss Milvus lenses and a kindly donated probe lens for a couple of shots. Considering we had such a small window to shoot this, I actually think it came out pretty good. I like working with less cooks in the kitchen, both literally and figuratively. Charlie, the gaffer, and his Spark had both worked with me on the 80K video, and we'd already discussed what we'd do differently should we do something similar again. So they were very efficient in getting everything set just how I'd want it without too much need for steering. I would have loved less beige and yellow in the frame. We did try some heavier plant life in the mid and foreground to break it up, and it looked nice, but the client vetoed it, saying,
"It's not the McPlant burger."
What the client wants, the client gets. I would have also liked more extreme slow-mo and camera moves, but budget. So no art department on this one, no runner. Jack from production and myself nicking a table from the restaurant across the way and balancing it on a Pelly case to bring it to the height we needed, simply because we didn't have any apple boxes to do the job. Less people and a chilled atmosphere with the client meant that we could experiment once we got the shots that we needed to make the edit work. Like this jizzy looking sauce onto the matte box. There was simply no time for that on the larger shoot, and I know that I would have been met with reasons why I couldn't or shouldn't, rather than just grabbing some cling film and doing it with the camera balance on its batteries and myself trying to hold the source gun steady in the frame above. There was a few rounds of amends, down to copy capitalizations, spellings, and music choice, but it was a relatively painless and quick edit process. No budget for grades, so I did a basic job by myself. I was trying to make the greens look less yellow, but failed to isolate the ones I wanted specifically because I suck at grading. Another buyout for my time, £2,000, or roughly $2,700. A third of the budget, but I was doing way more than a third of the things. But against the amount of time that went into this relative to the larger budget, not that bad comparatively. Still, without trying to sound like too much of a dick, I should have been making more than this for the level of work and knowledge that was brought to the table. But beggars can't be choosers. It's the start of the year, things are relatively quiet, and I'd rather be making money than not. If I had a much bigger commercial budget, what are the things I would have done differently? Well, first of all, we'd have way more days to shoot, way more attempts at getting the food right. We'd absolutely have a food economist, no questions asked. We'd have a bigger set to allow for more depth, more layers. We'd definitely have a motion capture arm and operator, along with the Phantom. And I'd love to have spent more money on art department and have some custom props like glass-plated ovens so we could do some time-lapse stuff. And talent behind the camera. I would have had a much better DP. I'd have a much better colorist. The gaffer would have more crew, and maybe we'd even have a grip. If you missed your early opportunity, it's not too late to give this video a like below. Do it for the algorithm. Do it for me. Better yet, do it for yourself. But mostly for me. If food, and more specifically food cinematography, is your thing, I go into detail about what I learned working with a cinematographer who specialises in food in this video here. And if you still haven't yet subscribed, then now would be a good time to do that. Thanks very much for watching. Make sure to come back and see me again for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.